In a world where people born with an extreme skill, called a grace, are feared and exploited, Katsa carries the burden of a skill even she despises, the grace of killing. She lives under the command of her uncle Randa, King of the Midlands, and is expected to execute his dirty work, punishing and torturing anyone who displeases him. When she first meets Prince Po, who is graced with combat skills, Katsa has no hint of how her life is about to change. She never expects to become Poe's friend. She never expects to learn a new truth about her own grace, or about a terrible secret that lies hidden far away, a secret that could destroy all 7 kingdoms with words alone. Graceling by Kristin Cashore. Cashore? Her name is a YA name.
Yes. Yes, it is. And this is the YA Sisterhood. And we are a collective mess.
We are.
We lost a day this week in there.
I fell asleep instead of posting the clue.
And I worked.
And I slept until 9 p.m., people.
And
9 p.m.
She slept till I got home, basically. And then, by then, it was like, oops.
Yep.
And then it took me too long to read the book because I've been working 10 hours.
And because she took too long to start.
I did not. I started earlier than I've started any other book for this show.
This one is a little bit longer than the ones we've done so far.
It's so very long.
That bad. I read it in 2 sittings, so it wasn't that bad. I mean, they were longer sittings, but they weren't like...
It was a very long book. A very long book by Kristin Cashore. Oh, Kayla, would you like to...
preface this episode?
Yes.
I would like to preface this episode by saying that I have the grace of talking too much.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think I would like to preface this episode by saying that because I read the book earlier and it took Jessica a little bit longer, I have forgotten some stuff in the interim, and I'm sorry.
And that's okay. And I would like to preface this episode by saying that we're going to do a light editing episode so we can get it out on time.
That, and also
a day late.
We've been kind of experimenting with some different mics. Last episode we had some audio trouble, so we've gone back to our regular mic, and we're going to do like a little bit of sound editing, but this episode is going to be pretty raw, I think, just because we want to kind of try some different stuff out, so let us know what you think.
Prepare yourself for crazy tangents and oohs and ums.
I like to
She does like to and like.
And that too. And also that too.
So let's start by talking about the author, Kristin Cashore. Kristin Cashore.
Okay.
So, unlike most of the YA books that we've done, this one actually has an author blurb on it. So we're very excited to actually read about the author,
what the author wants you to know.
Yeah.
Kristin Cashore grew up in the Northeast Pennsylvania countryside as the second of 4 sisters. She received a bachelor's degree from Williams College and a master's from the Center for the Study of Children's Literature at Simmons College. And she has worked as a dog runner, a packer in a candy factory, an editorial assistant, a legal assistant, and a freelance writer. She has lived in many places, including Sydney, New York City, Boston, London, and Austin. And she currently resides in Jacksonville, Florida, where her daily activities include walking along the St. Johns River and counting pelicans on the dock. Kristin Cashore's debut novel, Graceling, grew from her daydreams about a girl who possesses extraordinary powers, and who forms a friendship with a boy with whom she is insurmountably incompatible. So, I want to talk about the fact that this is her debut novel, and I think it'll come back up as we go throughout, but I definitely think, while there were a lot of things I liked about this book, I think it was very much clearly a debut novel.
It was quite wordy. It had, we'll at some point discuss this, but it had some structural issues.
Mm-hmm. It wasn't bad, but it was clearly new.
It was definitely the work of an academic writer too.
Yes.
I felt like the way she handled foreshadowing, it made me wonder if she's ever worked as a critic or if she's mostly like learned about how to write and never done it before.
I don't know. It's hard to say. We can kind of get.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I just because of the fact that she does, like, her foreshadowing is a bit clumsy, and we'll talk about that, and just a few.
Some of the things she does.
Yeah, it's things that you would expect a person who comes from a more academic experience.
Yeah. And I think maybe she gets in her own head based on the way it felt to me that way. And we can talk about that more in style too, because as a writer,
we have a lot in style in this one for a change.
Yeah.
We talk about the cyclicalness of it, and all of that. I want to talk about, unless there was any other part of that you wanted to discuss.
Just kind of the last part about
yes,
yeah,
the daydream she had about a girl with superpowers who falls in love with someone who's fundamentally incompatible.
She doesn't say superpowers. I think it's just like lots of power, extraordinary powers.
Superpowers.
Yeah.
Whatever. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The character's not like the other girls.
Correct. Definitely not.
That is not what this book is about.
Not really, no.
So I thought that was interesting that she chose to include that as part of her author's, like, blurb. Just because I think it's interesting. It speaks to nerdy people who are interested in the bones of how a book comes together.
Yes, I agree. Because for me, like, working on things, it'll start with one thing, and by the time you get to the end, it may have changed into something totally different. But that bare bones, the beginning, is still there, buried in it. It's not there in terms of, like, when you read it, you don't see that. But in terms of, like, reading her saying that, I could see where it evolved from that.
Yeah. Like, I definitely think that ties in. Like, I wonder if Gideon, that character, is based off of the original Incompatible
Maybe.
boy.
It's hard to say.
And that's, like, I think that's interesting that the story has evolved so much from its early proto sort of beginnings.
So this book is very much about freedom versus control.
100%.
With sort of a
strong theming in this book.
Yes.
Very strong theming.
It's very much, she is looking for freedom and she is also looking for control. And I think it was a really interesting take on that. The idea of she really wants her own freedom, but she's scared of her own freedom to an extent. She's scared to not be in control and not to be controlled, but she also wants to have that freedom and not be controlled and not have to keep control. And it was a very fun, like, sort of walking that line.
I wonder if this author has read a fellow by the name of Plato.
And I don't.
Who knows? Perhaps we'll discuss that more in the symbolism section.
Perhaps we will. And then you mentioned
one of the themes that's touched on in a more light capacity is lineage and its relationship partly to women's empowerment, and that kind of relates back to the control thing of our main character's character. She wants to have that control over her life and her body, and that ties into the grander lineage theme, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And lineage is going to be a theme in a fantasy novel that involves warring kingdoms.
Yeah. Especially
in one that's got such a standard succession system, because you didn't want to make up a new one.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
I don't either. But it means that
lineage matters.
Lineage matters. Like, if you're going to use a used element, make it work for the story. Don't do it just for set dressing.
Yeah.
So I think she did a very good job in that.
I agree. Let's talk about Katsa. She's our main. She's our main lady.
She's not like the other girls.
She is not like the other girls, and when I read this the first time, I really, really liked Katsa. I still do like Katsa.
She's okay.
She is a bit heavy-handed. Yes. I like a few elements about her a lot. I like that she's very strong, very calculated to an extent, and I like that she responds with emotional turmoil with anger.
Yeah. For sure.
Because I think a lot of characters don't use that quite right, and I think she used it well in this.
And it was fun that they did that with a girl character,
yes,
too.
And that when she finally realizes she has feelings, she gets pissed. She's like, I can't believe I caught feelings. I'm so mad at you for making me like you. And, like, I feel that a little bit. Like, I feel that a little bit.
Yeah, no, for certain.
She's very stubborn.
She is very stubborn.
And for someone who's so calculated, she's very emotional.
Yeah.
It very much told us that she was calculated and then showed us that she was emotional.
Uh-huh.
There were some moments where they were like, hey, you're emotional, but I think it was a lack of self-awareness a little bit. She thinks she's calculated.
Yeah, I don't know that that's entirely true, though. There was lots of... You mentioned this when we were discussing this script and the style discussion, but I think that she has a hard time with distinct character voices.
I agree with that. And
that maybe character voice is one of her weaknesses as a writer.
Well, I think I think Poe has the strongest character voice, but Katza's all right. She has some of her own voice.
She gets stronger throughout the novel.
Yes.
And
the back half of the novel especially, you can tell.
And it's funny, it almost feels like maybe she wrote parts of the end of the novel at the beginning.
Yeah, I agree. And then wrote the beginning to try and match. Which is someone who's done that, I think that that's a fair assessment. I mean, I can't know for sure, but it certainly felt like she wrote the back half of the novel first.
Yeah.
And then she wrote the beginning to set it up.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's what made me think of, we want to talk about style so bad.
We really do. Let's talk about Poe. He had a pretty...
Okay.
Well, unless you had something else to say about Katza.
Yeah.
Oh, well, you were going off on style. I thought you were...
I know. There's a lot to mine in that section is all. I think Katza made me think of our discussion from our episode Magical Teenage Punk Shenanigans. I believe that's episode 4. 3? Episode 3, y'all.
Maybe 2. I don't know.
I don't know. It was a good episode.
The Blue Girl.
We had this discussion about Charles DeLint's characterization of his main character. He wanted so badly, and I think so does this author, they want so badly to have a good role model, a healthy role model for young women that they kind of go over the top.
I agree.
And Katza's characterization is so over the top that I found it very frustrating a lot of the time.
Yes.
She just states...
No, we'll talk about that in style.
I'm talking about Katza.
Oh. I thought you were talking about the soapbox thing.
Mm-mm.
Okay, sorry.
I mean, but it is related because Katza, as a character, just states plot sometimes to us, the reader, for, you would think for expediency's sake, but then
they do it again. Which, again, sometimes you do have to kind of have your main character exposit, even though it doesn't really make sense.
But then don't show it.
But then don't do it again
as well. I mean, I don't know. I just feel like that sort of cyclical thing she does is
a bit annoying.
It's a bit annoying, and it's kind of the mark of an author's first baby.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think it's her first baby. I think, and I get it. I feel that, but also this is what we do, so we gotta.
I will say, I love it when a main character's internal conflict and, the plot
coincide.
I
agree.
With the theme specifically.
Yes. I thought that was very tightly woven and well done, but that's in style. Nice. We're not there yet.
I know. Well,
she wants to talk about style.
I don't. I'm talking about Katza still. I'm still talking about the fact
to trickily talk about style.
But it's important to character. I'm going to talk about character when we get to style.
I know.
You got your chocolate in my peanut butter.
You get your peanut butter in my chocolate.
Okay. So yeah, now we can move on. Let's move on to Poe.
I really like Poe.
Poe's interesting.
I think Poe is interesting.
Poe is very wise.
I think he has to be kind of. I think he has sort of the understanding of someone who always knows what everyone thinks about him. Unfiltered. And I think that would likely wizen a person up quite a bit. And also...
I think that's fair.
I think his behavior is sort of, I think, accurate to what someone who could do that would likely be. It wasn't so standoffish, like I hate everyone. It was very much like, I can make you like me because I know what you think about me, but I also know what you think about me, so I'm going to keep everybody at an arm's length. And I thought that was well done.
Yeah, I could agree with that. I think Poe definitely had a very distinct voice.
He did. I think he had the most distinct voice in the book.
Until the end.
Until the end, yes. I also think I think that he is... I'm sorry, I've lost
That's a lot of dead air,
I know,
man.
I'm sorry, I've lost my train of thought. Give me a second. I'm so tired.
You guys.
It's been a week. He is very much understanding of Katza's original frustration that he can read minds.
Yeah. Poe, the thing about Poe is this. He is a prince from another country.
He can sense the things around him, but he tells people that his grace is fighting because it helps him with fighting. But on top, like...
He's basically an empath.
Yeah, essentially he's an empath. And he, because of his abilities, when people are thinking about him in some way, he can read their minds sometimes. And Katza hates mind readers.
Yeah, like she almost kills a little kid.
She doesn't almost kill her, but
she does almost kill a little kid.
Kinda. She threatens, but I don't think she would actually go through with it.
She seemed pretty intent on doing it in the actual moment when she encountered the child.
Point being, she hates mind readers. She wants her thoughts to be private. She's got some kinks. I'm just kidding.
Well, I mean, don't we all?
But yeah, so he seems pretty understanding and willing to move at her pace, and I thought that was cool. And I also like that he was just chill about the whole, like, we're just together and we don't have to get married and I don't care about that.
Yeah, I mean, even though all of that's still very soapboxy. Very soapboxy.
It was, but...
It was still a good lesson, and I'll take what I can get. And
I think also the fact that he's, like, quote-unquote the perfect boyfriend in some ways made sense because he can read her mind. And I felt like that was kind of unfair to an extent of, like...
I almost feel like, too, his characterization at the end of the book is, like, an almost her attempt at a direct refutation of making him too perfect.
Yeah.
Because he makes a wild character swing at the end.
Yeah, and then it's kind of like...
Like, what?
It was,
And then out of nowhere, he's kind of better.
And then he's fine.
And then the book's over for reasons.
Yeah. So, Raffen is Katza's best friend.
Moving on.
Oh, did you have something else to say about Poe?
No, I just figured we'd transition a little more smoothly. Like professionals.
Rude.
Okay.
I just knew we were done talking about him, and I wanted to talk about Raffen.
So, Raffen.
I like Raffen.
Raffen is the son of... Katza's from a place called the Midlands. It's a kingdom surrounded by other kingdoms that are all at war with each other.
Anyway.
Raffen is Katza's cousin. He's the future king of the Midlands.
And they're really close.
And they basically grew up as brother and sister.
So Katza's kind of isolated. I'm not trying to go back to her, but she's kind of isolated because of her grace, which is, people think her grace is killing.
Right.
We totally forgot to talk about
we didn't even talk about what it was.
Her grace is killing, or they think her grace is killing, because she killed a man when she was young. And...
Man who was being a creepazoid.
He was totally creeping. And because of that, people are scared of her. And Raffen is one of the few people who has
never really been scared of her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he is an intellectual.
He's a mad scientist.
He is. And I always have a soft spot for mad scientist characters. They're just a lot of fun. He's so... He's just really supportive of her and who she is as a person.
So perfect, though.
Yeah.
That's the thing. It's like, he's a lamp person.
He's not. Don't say that about Raffen.
Okay, but he's too perfect.
He is a little bit too perfect. He doesn't have any flaws.
No, not really.
Not that I could ascertain. I tried.
He's understanding about everything. He always knows the right thing to say to Katza. But you also have to understand this book is told from Katza's perspective.
Yeah.
So that does affect like, whenever you have that style of narration, it does affect how you should read characters. And Katza definitely hero worships Raffen.
I think
in a
so,
lot of
a little
ways.
bit, yeah.
But I do think Raffen is a little bit too perfectly written.
Yeah.
He's got a...
no, not perfectly written. Because if he were perfectly written...
written to be perfect.
Yes.
He's written to be too perfect.
Yes.
And I just think that's a little weird. And his relationship with his assistant is a little too perfect.
I think they're together.
Oh, no, for sure. We're pretty sure Raffen is gay with his assistant, Bon.
It's not explicitly stated. It's not even heavily hinted.
But there's a moment where he's like, what, are you in love with me now? And like Raffen and Bon look at each other.
And then laugh.
They look at her and they start laughing. And
maybe that's just them laughing because they're like, never. But it certainly came across as like...
You know we're gay.
We're together, you idiot.
Yeah.
And also she talks about them always being in the workroom and there's a bed in there because they're in there all hours of the night. And it was very much like, and again, this is all speculation.
I don't know. This author was not subtle about foreshadowing in this book.
That's true.
And she's talked a lot about Raffen's marriage prospects and his future.
Yeah, but... I don't know. It's hard to say.
I wonder how explicit... Like, it's the first in a series, like many of the ones we did.
Let us know if you think that Raffen might be...
Read the book. Tell us what you think.
Yeah.
Is Raffen gay, do you think?
Are Raffen and Bond together?
Like, if Raffen is gay, for sure they're together.
Yeah.
For sure. Because they're written like an old married couple.
They are.
And that's pretty much Bond's entire characterization.
Yeah, he doesn't matter.
The assistant / Raffen's boyfriend.
Well, and I will say, I don't think that Raffen's a lame character, but to an extent, he's not really relevant. He's a healer, kind of. Mm-hmm. He also gets close with Poe, but
yeah,
overall, he doesn't really do much except for be a friend to Katza, which I think is good, but he's not really like... If you took him out, the plot would pretty much still happen.
Yeah. She would just be also know how to make medicines and be lonelier.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to that end, there's also our kind of mentor-y characters, Mom and Dad. Not really. All is the head spy master for King Randa. In the Midlands Kingdom. And he has trained Katza her whole life to be able to control her ability to kill people.
And hurt people.
So she's basically a well-oiled machine by the time we get to her in the book. And All is just a wizened old man who has, like, a newly formed moral compass. In his old age.
Newly-ish. I think Katza kind of pushed him towards it. And then he kind of was like, oh, I can be good. Type thing.
Yeah. And kind of the opposite of that, we have Helda.
Who just straight up saw Katza and was like, I'm going to help you.
Well, Helda, like the story of how Helda came to be in her employment actually kind of made me tear up. I thought she did a really good job nailing Helda's character, too.
I really liked Helda.
Yeah.
I wanted more of Helda. I don't know why Helda was there in terms of, like, she didn't do much with her, but she laid so much groundwork for Helda to be important that I wonder if she's going to come up later.
I think she might, because at the end of the book, she's talking about going to get Helda from the Midlands so that Bitterblue has someone reliable to look after her in their private time. And I think that's pretty cool. I don't know. I think Helda's really interesting. She's an older lady who worked in the palace kitchens. And her son, back when she had been an innkeeper, had been graced. And his grace was swimming. And since that wasn't very useful to the king of a landlocked country, she basically, raw and uncut, everybody.
I'm sorry.
Drinking tea. Making clanging sounds. But because as a swimmer he wasn't very useful, he was sent back home to live with his parents in their inn. And was basically harassed until his death.
Yep.
And so she sees Katza being abused by everybody else in the palace. She can't seem to keep she doesn't have her own serving staff, which means she doesn't have any women in her life, basically.
And Helga's like, you need women in your life.
You need women. And she actually explicitly has this conversation with her, like, has anyone talked to you about your first bleedings yet? Mm-hmm. And I thought that line was pretty cute, actually. She was like, if anyone makes me bleed, gets all aggro about it. And I'm like, that is so for real, though.
Yeah.
And
Helga's just like, oh, hun.
Like, I think one of my favorites for Helga is when she's like, they were just going to let you find out on your own and run screaming through the castle thinking someone tried to kill you.
Yeah.
And she just was like, you could see this character's heartbreaking for this little girl. So Helga's dope. She basically volunteers to be Katz's handmaid after that. Mm-hmm. To help take care of her.
And they're very different.
Yes.
Katza is a tomboy through and through, mm-hmm. and Helga is very much like, let me help you at least know how.
No, you need to feel better about yourself tonight. Wear the sexy dress.
Yes.
Like, that is Helga all the way.
Yeah.
And she's very maternal in her feelings towards Katza, and I think it's pretty interesting to see that kind of female relationship where the two characters are so different but still very close.
Yes. And they don't agree on a lot.
No,
but they're still very close.
And in that same household, Gideon is how I'm going to say his name because
I think that's Gideon.
Gideon
is our nice guy. He is a nice guy. Actually,
he's not really.
Okay. I don't hate him.
He spends the whole book nagging her. Like, okay, Katza talks in her narration a lot about how he's always criticizing her.
Constantly.
But that's not the character we see.
We see some of it. But a lot of it's him, like, mother henning.
Yeah.
Like, have you eaten enough? Have you rested today? Mm-hmm. Like, very much he thinks she's a damsel and he's going to rescue her. Mm-hmm. And she doesn't really take it as that, I think.
Yeah. Gideon is a lord serving under King Randa. And he's a favorite, so he's at court quite a bit. And he is in love with Katza, but he wants to possess her as his wife.
Yes.
And
eventually he actually proposes to her.
In a very cringy and uncomfortable scene that took way too long for me to read.
It started out, in my opinion, as him saying, like, I know you don't want to get married ever, but if you marry me right now, you'll be safe from the king. Mm-hmm. Because she just made the king very angry.
Yeah.
She just declared herself an enemy of the kingdom at this point. And he's like, if you marry me, he won't try to kill you, and you can stay nearby, and you can still see your friends, and you can still be around. And she's just kind of like, no. And he's like, well, you're never going to get another offer like this. And then he goes full Mr. Collins. Mm-hmm. Like, surely you don't mean no.
You nerd.
Well, I mean, so much Pride and Prejudice reference. I'm sorry.
For those of you who are not Jane Austen nerds.
But he goes full, like,
nice guy.
Surely you wouldn't say no to me. Surely this is all you being coquettish. Like, surely you actually want to get married and you're just saying that you don't because you don't think anyone will propose. And I will propose because I love you, and clearly you must love me back.
It's obvious he's got this idea of her built up in his head as someone who's very self-sacrificing.
Yeah.
He's definitely got her on a pedestal, and he wants to rescue her from her life of murdering for the evil king.
Which, like, fair.
He sees
she
himself.
Hates it.
This is a chivalrous, like, era society, so it's not weird that he would see himself as, like, the hero for this poor girl forced to murder for the king.
Well, and
but
the thing
is also not taking into account her agency at all.
Yeah, well, and she doesn't want to kill for the king, but she does like to fight. Like, her and Poe, that's how they become close, is they get into fistfights, which really bothers Gideon. And I want to talk about that
and the fact that it bothers Gideon really bothers Katza.
Yeah. So Katza likes to fight. No one can keep up with her because she is a machine until she meets Poe. And Poe can keep up with her. Poe can fight with her. He still loses every time, and she still beats the crap out of him, but he can almost keep up with her.
He's a challenge.
He's the first challenge she's had maybe ever.
Yeah.
And so they fight. And in their first fight, Poe's ring accidentally cuts Katza's cheek. And Gideon has a huge problem with this.
He has a meltdown and challenges thee to a duel at Poe.
Essentially, yeah. And Poe is like, listen, I'm sorry. I forgot I was wearing a ring. I won't hurt her face again. but she wants to fight. And Gideon kind of like grumbles into acceptance, but he's really not okay with it. And he sees it as sort of Poe beating up Katza, which is hilarious because Katza 100% beats up Poe every time. But he sees it very much as a man who would fight with a woman is bad, even though she is a fighter. And I understand.
Is lowly.
Yes.
And I think there is a racial element to it as well, because Poe is implied to be
not white. And I think it's implied that he's maybe
explicitly black.
I think so.
I don't think it's ever explicitly stated.
But
I think she keeps it pretty ambiguous.
But regardless, Gideon hates that, and I think it's interesting because it really shows his lack of understanding of Katza, which is why I think you mentioned that he might be the original boy that she befriends, because they're friends. Like, they are friends. But
she definitely values his company and his experience and his wisdom and the council. However,
she wants him to respect her as a fighter in her own right,
as an equal, as a person.
Yes,
and I appreciate that. You know,
even though it was a bit heavy-handed.
Yeah,
it is fair to talk about.
The execution is different than the message for me in this one. The message is great. There's a lot of great messages in this book, and one of them is delivered through Gideon for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that'll continue in the next book, because when it ended, you know, they were talking about Gideon basically throwing himself into council work. We didn't even talk about the council. Council work, which is like their rebel activist group, whenever Katza leaves, as a way to cope with her leaving him behind.
Yeah, and she's the one who started the council originally as an act of defiance against the king. The king is a bully.
Randa is a bully, and I definitely think he exists to kind of mirror the Bitter Blue Lek relationship.
I agree, but I do want to talk about him in his own right, because I think he's more than that.
I think Randa is that guy who always went out of his way to make you feel stupid in high school.
And I think that's a tactic.
Yes.
I think he's not just thing. Yeah, he's not just trying to make her feel stupid. I think it's very much, you're so stupid, you need me. He wants to continually remind her not only how much control he has over her, but how much she needs him to survive, because he cannot stand he's terrified of her. He is terrified of her.
Yeah, when she finally puts in that pink slip, like, she throws in her notice and bounces.
He has 200 soldiers, and he's like, okay, bye.
Yeah, everybody just lets her walk out the door. She's like, here's how it'll go if you fire that arrow right now. I'll win, and you'll be the first one to die. And I think that sort of ended that conversation.
And her thought process is, even if I lose, you'll still die before I lose. Very much if I'm going down, I'm taking you with me. And he is a coward by nature.
Yes,
he hides behind her muscle, and I think
he's all bombast, and he's definitely a showman.
Yes,
in a lot of ways. He basically does. Well, when we get to Lek, we'll talk about him. But he basically does what Lek does without a grace.
Yeah.
And it's kind of impressive and very realistic to people in power, for sure, especially people who've lived in power and learned how to have it their whole lives. Just knowing that they will be listened to whenever they speak, that their needs will be attended to, but that also eyes are always constantly on them.
Yeah.
So how do you maintain control under that level of scrutiny?
Yeah, and I think he's very smart. He's very shrewd. And when she's young, she's 8 years old when her Grace. So the thing with the Grace, which if you've read the book, you know, but if you haven't read the book, a Grace means you have 2 different colored eyes, and you have an ability that reveals itself between like 6 and 12-ish.
Usually before puberty, but there are
late cases as well.
Yeah.
So she's 8 years old when one of her uncles or cousins or somebody is kind of creepy, and he puts his hand on her leg, and she kills him. She doesn't mean to kill him, but she
whacks
kills
him in the face to make him stop touching her, and he dies.
Yeah, and so everyone assumes that her grace is killing, and most kings would immediately have someone like that put out. And instead, Randa's like, hey...
Actually, let me use you as an instrument of control.
I will use you as an instrument of control. And he has her very tightly wound. It's very much, you hurt people that I tell you to hurt in the exact specificity that I tell you to hurt them. In this, with the time limit that I tell you, with the amount of pain that I tell you. Mm-hmm. I want specific results. She's very much an enforcer, and he does it he uses her like a hammer dangling over other people, and he controls her like a hammer dangling over her. Yeah, and absolutely. He will call her name while she's doing other things so that she has to stop and listen, even though he's not talking to her. He's very much, he's very bright, and he's good at it. He keeps her for a while. If it weren't for, I think, her meeting Poe, probably. Yeah,
if it wasn't for Poe questioning the situation she was in, it's sort of like being in a cult. Like, someone from the outside's like, but what about this, though?
And I think she would have eventually gotten there on her own.
I think the council was her proto-beginnings of moving in that direction.
But I think Poe just straight up being like, well, what would happen if you didn't do what he said? And she's like, but I have to.
But why, though?
And he's like, do you? You can do whatever you want.
What's he gonna do?
What, you're like 400 times stronger than him. Yeah. And she's just kind of like, oh. She's like, but I'm scared I'm gonna kill him because I'm mad. And he's like, then don't. Don't kill him.
Just don't do it.
And she's like, oh.
You actually are the one with the control in this scenario.
Yeah, and I think that is really interesting because I think Randa is he's an interesting villain, and to me, in a lot of ways, he's more interesting than Lek.
Yeah, Lek was a bit of a letdown after being hyped up for, 360 pages.
And I like Lek, and I like his story, and I like the mystery of him, and we can talk about him more, but he's just evil. He's just chaos, like pure evil, just so much evil, the most evil. He's bad for the sake of being bad. We don't really know much about him. He
literally tortures children and puppies.
Yeah, just because for lulz. Like he likes it. And it's very much, I'm the big bad, I'm so bad, there's no good in me, and there's no reason for it, but it just is. This is how it is. Whereas Randa is more, in my opinion, nuanced.
Yeah, I think he's a little more interesting. I look forward to, if the second book does what the first one foreshadows at all, learning a bit more about him as a character, because she's supposedly going back to that court at some point to make sure she can move through, like, freely through the Midlands.
Yeah.
So I think it's difficult to move on from the Midlands to the rest of the story because it feels like two different books.
It does. However,
that does bring us to part 2 and 3 of the book,
which is actually sectioned off as part 2 and 3
for some reason. I don't understand why those sections happened. Anyway, Bitter Blue is
Lek's daughter.
And
we should talk about who Lek is, though.
Lek is the king of Moncia?
I think so.
We'll talk about it when we get to settings, but this has very bad YA name syndrome in this book.
So Lek is the king, and he is essentially known as a beloved king who helps animals and children and all people, and he's nonviolent, and he does nothing wrong, and he's perfect, and everyone believes this without fail. Full confidence. Nobody ever says bad things about him. Yeah. Katsa believes it so much that the first time she's brought with the idea that he may be less than perfect, she's like, what?
No, she immediately discounts the idea that it could be true. Yeah. And that is because, I guess we could talk about Bitter Blue at the end. Sure. That is because Lek...
has
a grace. His grace is he can make people believe whatever he wants by speaking.
And that goes through other people.
He can use other people as a vessel for his words.
So rumors, essentially. Yeah. If he says something and someone else repeats it, I'm sorry, my dog is dreaming. Wes.
Stop dreaming, Wes.
Buddy.
Sorry, Internet. Wesley's tired. Wesley.
He does not want to wake up either.
He doesn't. He's not happy with me, even though I'm giving him pets.
Anyway, so Lek is he has this grace. So he tells everyone that he's a great leader, that he's kind to animals, that he has all these shelters, that he helps all these children. But what he's doing...
He's married to Poe's aunt.
Yes, correct. And at the beginning of the story is Katza and Poe meet because she's rescuing Poe's grandfather who has been kidnapped, but no one knows why. And we find out that it was Lek.
Yes, it was Lek for reasons.
To control his wife and child.
That was like tossed in at the end as part of the denouement, though.
Yeah.
That felt like very contrived to me. I feel like she just sort of had to think of a way to contrive to get everybody over there for this other story she wanted to tell, like you mentioned. Mm-hmm. And Grandpa Tilif is the best way she could think of.
I mean, I feel like that's fair. Mm-hmm. So, Lek is not good or kind. He uses his grace, and he's evil. He's just evil. He tortures children. He tortures animals. He is Mr. Bad. And he sets his eyes on his daughter, Bitterblue, who is Poe's cousin.
Yes.
So...
Bitterblue is 10. Mm-hmm. She's very small for her age, apparently. So that keeps getting brought up in the story.
Yeah.
And she is not graced. She's just, seems like a good kid. And Lek just wants to torture her because he likes torturing young girls the most. And that's his daughter. And he wanted to. And she's finally at the age where he enjoys that. Mm-hmm. And that's what kind of broke Ashen, the mother, out of the stupor a little bit, enough to protect Bitterblue. By the time we run into them, much like an anime, we run into Ashen just as she's being shot in the back with an arrow.
It's true.
And dies.
She thinks her final thoughts to Poe, even though she doesn't know
about his grace. So basically, she dies. They have to go find Bitterblue out in the forest and avoid the troops who can ensnare Katza.
And Bitterblue is an interesting character because she's afraid, especially of men, but she is very, very tenacious.
Yeah, she's got moxie.
She is, and even in the beginning when she's in shock and she probably knows that her mom is dead already, she's hiding in a tree stump, she's freezing cold, it's freezing outside, she's soaking wet, she's cowered with a knife, she knows that Lek is after her. And, Lek is very one-dimensional, but I feel that Bitterblue is not. I feel like Bitterblue has layers. And
for sure.
So she finally...
I like that she did not ever get tough during their journey. Mm-hmm. That was kind of nice.
I mean, she's tough in some ways. She's got mental fortitude.
But I hate this idea that if you rough it long enough, eventually you'll just be a mountain man.
Yeah.
And when you're a 10-year-old little girl without the right equipment in the middle of the mountains in the wintertime, it may not be that weird that you go to bed crying and wake up crying every day. Because everything hurts and you can't do anything else. And I thought that was an interesting detail to include.
I agree. So events happen. Bitterblue really likes Katza and looks up to Katza and wants to learn how to defend herself. Mm-hmm. She desperately wants to learn how to kill her own father if she has to, if it comes to that. Mm-hmm. She wants to learn how to use a knife. She doesn't care what anybody thinks.
No.
And she is... in a lot of ways, very intuitive.
Yes.
She picks up on a lot, and I think that felt fair to her age.
Yeah.
Because of what she's gone through.
And I thought it sort of implied that maybe not all of Poe's intuitiveness was from his grace.
And maybe it's a family trait.
Maybe it's a bit of a family trait.
Yeah.
Sort of like the fighting thing.
Yeah.
So
I think that's fair.
So the person doing the most in this book,
doing the most
in this whole book, it was honestly very difficult to quantify who was doing the most. All the kings were doing a lot.
Yeah,
there's a king named Thigpen in this book.
It's true. If I got to pick a doing the most, I would have said Gideon.
Gideon is doing a lot, and he's a contender.
Also,
I think Rhonda. Roar is doing a lot.
Roar is doing a lot. Roar is
the king
Poe's
of
dad.
Yeah, Poe's dad, the king of the Leonids.
Leonids, yeah.
The king of the brown people.
But sorry, who is your doing the most?
I want to say Rhonda.
Okay, interesting.
Kind of. He's extremely extra.
He's very extra. I feel like if this were a movie, even though he was never described this way, I feel like he would 100% have a Megamind cape.
Oh,
with like the huge collar and like the flowing billowing like going behind him.
The man is a showman.
He is
for
a showman.
sure.
Yeah, and he would have like the beard from the Hunger Games movies that twists and turns.
Oh, like the specialty barbershop fire
He would
beard.
100% have that beard. He would be played by the same actor. Like he
is this your new headcanon?
Yeah, I'm so sure.
Kayla's fan casting for the film version of Graceling, which came out how many years ago?
I don't even
Isn't there a film version? We didn't do research on that.
No, there's not a film of this. I don't think.
I don't know.
I've never found it, if it is.
It doesn't say on the book. That doesn't
No,
mean
I don't
anything.
think it's a film.
Yeah. I don't know.
But it could be.
It could
Here's
be.
looking at you, Hollywood.
Yeah, they could shoot on all those old Game of Thrones sets. Since like half of the novel
came out in 2008.
Yeah, since half of the novel is set in like a generic medieval timeland. Yeah. It's a
Middle
sort
Earth.
of. I had sort of my personal pet theory was that was intentional. Just because like making that space irrelevant was intentional. Mm-hmm. Just so that the spaces outside of her hometown stood out, make it more of a we're leaving our hometown kind of thing. But it felt weird and jarring to leave a space that wasn't well described and moving into a space that was suddenly relevant. Because it's very inconsistent treatment of the setting.
I agree. The setting was kind of. I wrote that I didn't think that the setting mattered.
That's what I was saying.
Until you get into the mountains, and that the kingdom names and stuff, it was very YA syndrome, but also like I still don't remember any of the kingdom names.
I just wrote the names suck in my notes.
Yeah, they're not great.
They're bad. Most of them start with the letter M.
Yep.
The only one I remember is Leonids and Midland because they're obviously both like. What's the word for it? It's not portmanteaus. They're both like intentional misspellings of existing words. Mm-hmm. And then what was
Lex's like Mordine or Maureen or Morian?
Morian and Sunderland. And
I remember that one sort of because they say it a lot. But
I remember it because I literally stopped reading this book 2 hours ago.
But before we hold on, I do want to talk about the setting. However, we kind of brushed on Katza and Rhonda's relationship and the mirror of control is very much like Bitterblue and Lex relationship.
Yeah, I agree. And
it's a mirror.
It's for sure a mirror. I think
maybe not as bad on Katza's end.
It's two different ways of controlling people is what it is. Like it's showing different kinds of control. You can be controlled against your will, or you can
be controlled,
have someone use your own mind against you. You know, and I think it was an interesting idea to parallel that. Mm-hmm. If you were gonna, it's a much better way of bridging the two stories together. I think, and I think I would have spent more time on that part of the story probably if I were the author, if I were editing this and giving feedback. I think that's what I'd say. I also think I would have spent a lot less time in the Midlands in the story.
Yeah, me too. That would have been like a couple of chapters probably. Mm-hmm. That we spent way too much time in that
in the beginning of the book.
Yeah. But we can go back to talking about the setting. So I think especially when they get into the mountain pass, she talked the setting kind of becomes relevant when she sees the mountains for the first time.
The landscape.
But whenever the landscape changes to them hiking through the mountain pass in the middle of winter during blizzards, that's whenever, and it was all the same. It was all just snow, but it felt more relevant there.
Because she was literally climbing a symbol of freedom.
Yeah. And also because it mattered. The cold mattered.
Absolutely.
The lack of water mattered. The lack of food mattered. The wind mattered.
I think those parts of the book might have been, I think, the most tightly written parts of the book. She had a very clear idea of how she wanted the tone of those scenes to feel, and she did a very good job of bringing that out.
Yeah.
I think
she spent a lot of time there.
Yeah, but to that end, the tone is a bit inconsistent as well in this book.
It's a bit all over the place.
I will say, I was at work. It gets kind of steamy a few times.
It does.
I was at work at my job, sitting in a chair next to my coworker, and I was like, oh my God, this tween book is steamy. Like, they get sexy.
They do.
Without getting explicit, which I think that's a good thing for a YA novel, at least. Not that I don't think YA novels should have sex at all, or not have, like, kids shouldn't have the option for more explicit novels at some point when they're aging, but it was a good way to depict the steaminess of being in a young, like a teen romance, without turning it into a smut novel.
I agree. I think I want to take a moment to talk about the steaminess in this novel versus the only other book that we've even had any sex in, which is the Tamora Pierce book.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have sex in that one. Just kidding. That's later.
Yeah, no, we didn't have sex in the first one.
Just kidding. La 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 la.
But I
so
see
this is the only book that we read that has sex in it. I see where you
were transitioning to with that, though, in the sense of, and we'll come back to the only one we've read that has sex in it thing here in a second. But that, like, you were kind of talking about how you feel like she's probably a Tamora Pierce fan.
I do. I think she is probably a Tamora Pierce fan for a couple of reasons. Mm-hmm. The way she has tried to shape some of her characters feels very reminiscent of Tamora Pierce. And this is not to say that she has or hasn't. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But there were some ways that it felt
heavily inspired.
That's better than the word I was going to use, which is derivative. And I don't want to say derivative, but a little bit derivative. It didn't
feel derivative just because, like, I definitely feel like this author has been writing long enough that she's got her own voice.
Yes. But it felt very much, inspired is a really good word for it. So if you've read, which we didn't read it in this podcast, but there's a series by Tamora Pierce about Alanna the lioness. And in one of the books, she hikes up a mountain in the freezing cold and almost dies because of the blizzard. And it feels very similar in setup. And that's not to say that she may have never read that, but it felt like the way that it was set up.
She also covers a lot of the same issues that Tamora covers in the book. I think not quite as, and not necessarily as nuanced of a way as Tamora handles it, but she definitely covers, being sex positive and being safe with your sex as a young adult so that you can have control over your life and body.
Yeah.
She goes, I think, a step or two farther by, I think, at the end, kind of advocating for open relationships a bit. I don't know. It's definitely, you can tell she's inspired by that style of putting your money where your mouth is and the moral of a story.
Yeah.
I don't know that she pulls it off as well as Tamora as often.
I don't think she does.
She does not really, because the tone and the rest of the story,
a bit all over the place.
It goes from steamy to bloody to angst to, like, court drama. It feels like you can tell that this person reads a lot of books, and that she's
very well read.
Like, they definitely have a really strong grasp on the feel they're trying to go for in each scene, but it just falls flat for me because
connectivity.
Yeah, they just don't flow together very well, I think is what it is.
If this were like a collection of short stories, I think it would be like...
maybe better.
Yeah.
But it just tonally, it felt inconsistent because the scenes didn't just flow well together. They weren't knit together very well. And, I think to that end, I think part of the problem with managing tone in this book came from the fact that when they're traveling in this book, they're basically, as you're reading the book, you are reading it in real time as they're traveling
it's
in
not
real
quite
time
that
for
bad.
months.
It's not quite that bad, but it drags. It drags
through the terrain of the Seven Kingdoms.
You do follow them in real time, it's tedious.
So tedious to read this book. I was legitimately mad yesterday when I got home and hadn't read the book because I spent so much of my free time at work working on this, like trying to read it.
Yeah,
and it's very frustrating because I'm a pretty fast reader. Mm-hmm. There's so much nonsense in this book. There's so much stuff we don't need.
Yeah, this book could have been trimmed down quite a bit and still been and would have been better.
It ends
for
4 times, Kayla.
It does end a few times. She has very straightforward foreshadowing, which I appreciate.
It annoyed me somewhat in some instances, and others I appreciated it. So
but because of that, and because I read it before, I kept waiting for things to happen. And I was like, I know this happens.
Yeah.
But it kept not happening. And then it would happen. And I'm like, okay, it's over. And then it's like, but there's more.
Yeah. It's just weirdly paced within the narrative of where she drops elements of the story is weird. And the way she reveals Lek is really weird. I thought we were going to get a whole nother story that kind of mirrored the first half of the book, which I think I enjoyed the first half of the book overall more than the second half. To that end, sorry.
Okay.
But I think I enjoyed the Bitter Blue travel through Escape from Lek scenes best as far as how well they were written.
I agree with that.
But as far as a story, I enjoyed that sort of
political intrigue. I wrote that in my notes. I loved the political intrigue in this book, and I wish she'd spent more time navigating that.
It was, and when she did do it, it was interesting, and it seemed like she was going there with the council. And the council. She just sort of is a plot thing. She just picks up and drops.
Yeah, she's
down.
just done now.
She's done now because she saved things, and it's just really weird,
Yeah, it's a bit strange because it seems she can't focus. She can't decide what to focus on in terms of what's important.
Exactly.
And because of that, it's a bit
and to that end,
it's like the Avengers movie that opened 3 times.
It's sort of like that, and it's also sort of. So when Lek is revealed, we just go from they've been traveling in the woods for 800 pages. We've been traveling with them. Everyone is hungry.
Everyone is tired. And
everyone is tired. Everyone is hungry. I'm tired reading it.
Yeah.
You were tired reading it. We're tired talking about it. And then out of nowhere, they see a break in the trees. They walk into a field. Lek strolls out shooting an arrow at his wife and kills her in front of them.
But I like his entrance.
He just shows up and he's like, boom, I'm Lek, I'm evil.
And he goes, oh, what a terrible accident. Yeah. And Katniss is like, oh, what a terrible accident. And she immediately is taken over by his grace. Poe is the only one who's not affected by it. But I thought that was a really interesting intro. My problem is that we don't see him again until the end of the book.
2 endings after it should have actually ended.
They rescue Bitter Blue. They travel far away. They get to the safe place. They're like, we're going there. And it bothered me that that's where he went.
That was the first Psych Out ending.
And he shows up where they're at. He's waiting for them when they get there.
Like Moriarty.
And we only interact. Yeah. And we only interact with him for 5 pages before he says something stupid and snaps Katza out of it. And I almost said Katniss. And snaps Katza out of it, and she kills him. And
why did we read this entire
It just seemed a bit lackluster in that he was built up, and he had I thought he had a really cool entrance. And then we don't see any more of him until the very, very end when he dies. And it's it was very much I have to overhype him and I can't write him, so I'm just going to tell you how evil and bad and terrible he is.
Think about how much fun that character could have been to write.
I mean, think of Kilgrave.
Yeah.
In Jessica Jones. He's the same character in a lot of ways, and he's part of it helps that, he's played by Tennant. But, anybody's played by Tennant is going to be engaging. But, for sure. But on top of that, he's such an interesting character because he's over the top, he's a showman. He doesn't have to do all these things. People will listen to whatever he says, but he enjoys it.
Also, I wonder... I know we're talking about Lek again, even though we've moved past that 2 sections from there.
So sorry, I didn't mean to. I don't know what's happening.
The fact that Lek wears an eye patch to hide the fact that he's graced, I wonder if not wearing the eye patch affects his grace.
Interesting, I don't know.
I didn't bring that up in questioning in the scripting section of this at all because I'm not a professional. But
I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah. And we'll never know because he dies at the end of the book.
But the point is we're not talking about Lek again. I was talking about the plot. Don't derail me now. So Kilgrave is I just threw a pencil across the room, guys. Kilgrave is such an interesting character, and he's so engaging to interact with story-wise. And I think Lek could have been something like that, but because we never see him, all we know is that he's evil and what his grace is, and then we only interact with him for a short time, in which he is interesting. And he's certainly playing mind games.
Yeah.
And then he dies. And it just felt very anticlimactic in that.
He was a very underutilized character. She utilized him to his theme, but I would have preferred a mirror story because the whole story leads up to Katza discovering she wants to teach young people how to defend themselves in this wild, crazy medieval world. It would have been more interesting to me if maybe Katza and Poe had gone to court and had to do a mirror of the story where Katza teaches Bitterblue how to stand up to her dad and do the thing.
Or even them having to deal with the mind games of pretending like they're following for his grace or whatever. But I'm not necessarily mad that she did something different with the plot because she's the author and it's her plot idea. However, it was very anticlimactic in the way that it was utilized. And then
it led to 200,000 pages of them running in the other direction and doing nothing.
Yes, we traveled there and then immediately we traveled back.
Yeah.
That's it. There's a book of it's like the 7th Harry Potter book. It's so much traveling and also, you know, after he dies, which is the whole point of the book, essentially, we still have like 100 pages left.
That's the second ending when he dies.
But there's more.
But there's more after that.
So it just, the whole thing felt very much like, but there's more every time.
Yeah.
And she shoots. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to lead that back into my anime note. I think she must be an anime fan because reading this book felt like a lot like watching an anime.
I agree.
And I think that's because it's so tropey. And we'll talk about that when we get to our tropes count because, oh boy, this one was egregious.
So,
but
she definitely...
it felt like an anime show. It does feel like
an anime, but on top of that, it felt like she wanted to shoehorn in her own opinions a lot. She wrote it in a very anime style, and I think she must watch anime, or she should if she doesn't, because she'd like it.
For sure.
But
100%.
On top of that...
Girl, watch Cardcaptor Sakura.
It's a lot like an anime in that you always have the main character who's monologuing about their own values, and it's not just like that with just Katza, but in terms of like the way she framed the marriage proposal and the way she's like, I don't want kids, and Gin's like, but you will, and she's like, but I won't, and it's very much, I felt like the author was trying to say something constantly, and I don't necessarily mind that sometimes.
A little bit.
And I wouldn't have minded a little bit in this book because it fit thematically.
It did fit thematically,
it was too much.
It was clunkily written.
Yes, it was clunkily written.
It's not that it's too much. Okay, I like to use Terry Pratchett again as an example. He can pack a lot of weirdness into a story with not a lot of words. Like he can pack a lot of information in with not a lot of words.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's necessarily that it was soapboxy so much as it was clumsily done soapboxing.
And it took me out of the story.
It took me out of the story. And that's, at the end of the day, the problem. If your soapboxing is so egregious that I am noticing you're doing it, you aren't doing it right.
Correct. I agree. I 100% agree.
So, yeah. But back to anime. No. I just think she spends a lot of time in Nowhere Land building up the character relationships that lead to nowhere.
Man.
You're hilarious.
I think I'm funny.
Yeah, they lead to nowhere. We were going to talk about the plot. I know I called like Moriarty, but I really believe the plot of the story, because of how it plays out, reminds me of an old like parlor detective novel or like a pulp detective novel in the vein of like a Sherlock Holmes or even maybe like one of the less good Agatha Christie's.
Except without any of the deductions.
Yeah, they're not making any. It's just the plot happens to them.
Poe makes some deductions.
Right.
But not really anything significant. It's like, I think he might be evil. And then...
And everybody's like, really? Nah, let's find out.
Yeah.
And then that's how the plot happens. But
he's very Moriarty-esque.
In the way that the plot unfolds, it feels very much like they introduce the mystery. You get all of the foreshadowing about Lek early on in a way that you're not supposed to notice, but I definitely noticed. And you get the B plot while they're still in the Midlands and Nowhereland. And then that's also a mystery. So that sort of that's supposed to reinforce the mystery of the greater story. But the breaks in the tone of the story felt more like the breaks in a case.
Yeah.
You know, and the way it all kind of came and was laid out felt more like she was trying to do a denouement in a detective story than trying to wrap up a book with a cohesive narrative and theme. Yeah,
I think that's fair. She definitely gets in her own head. It's very academically written in a lot of ways. Well, but because of that, and I say this personally in my experience, sometimes when I'm writing, I get very much in my own head and I think I'm being boring. And I am sometimes, and sometimes because I think I'm being boring, I'm trying to spice it up, and I end up putting more in there than necessary, or taking more out than necessary, and then you end up with these sort of ebbs and pulls in the tone that don't really make sense because I'm too worried about how I'm building up my story, and I think maybe she did that a little bit.
Maybe, and that comes back to like the cyclical writing things she does on accident, or like I think she just could have used maybe one more pass with an editor or someone she really trusted to clean up the structure of the story and really get in there. I think that there's a lot to love about it, but I mean, I don't know. I just one more pass with an editor, learn how to kill your babies, or at least let someone else do it. It's just general advice that's good for creatives.
I think that's fair. And I think she did some good, like, because she was very technical in her approach, I think she did a good job with some of her symbolism.
Absolutely.
Jewelry was definitely
a big one.
Huge, especially with Poe giving her his ring.
Yes.
Like, of his identity. And I think that was very much jewelry.
Oh, God!
Why would you do that?
Hold on. Boo. There's been a brief intermission.
Because this is raw and unedited, you guys get to hear the panic that just happened.
When my husband got home from work and scared me by popping his head over to a window that doesn't have the blinds down on it. So I just looked up while we were recording and saw a floating head on our porch and like had a heart attack.
It was very funny.
Sorry.
What were we saying?
Now.
Yes, jewelry. So very much a sense of identity, and I think jewelry is very much identity in this.
It's certainly related to identity because she finds jewelry unpleasant when the jewelry she's wearing doesn't reflect her existing reality.
Yeah.
Like early on, she's wearing some dangle earrings that she immediately throws off so that she can go do something that feels more like her. Like run around or go for a horse ride.
Yeah, and then later, whenever she gets Poe's necklace, she wears it constantly.
Yeah. But once she realizes it literally is a symbol of his personal identity, she cannot wait to give it back to him because she doesn't want to have that kind of control over his life. So it's a very nuanced moral, but jewelry does a lot of work in this book. It does. Sure.
Clothing as well, but I think that kind of ties in with jewelry, especially for Katza and what she's wearing. But I think too the functionality versus the splendor of clothing, I guess, of, her making pelts out of things that she's killed in the mountain so they don't die in a blizzard versus her having to wear a pretty dress that she doesn't want to wear.
Mm-hmm.
She's a very function over fashion person.
Correct. But I think there's something to be said about
the clothes themselves.
The clothes themselves and the statements they make about the universe that we're in.
Mm-hmm.
Pants, for example.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is generic medieval land, so pants are not traditionally worn by women, but Katsa wears them because of her job and because eventually it's believed that it makes her look a little even scarier to be a little more butch.
Mm-hmm.
And she eventually makes trousers for Bitter Blue.
In order to travel.
And be functional. Mm-hmm. It's a little second wave feminist.
A little bit.
Or not second, first wave feminist. Very much. We can
ride a bike.
Yeah, we can ride a bike, y'all.
I agree. Fighting is also a big symbol in this, I think.
Oh, okay.
Oh, did you have more to say about clothes? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm ready to go tonight.
I know.
Apparently.
We're good. It's fine. We're blazing through it, y'all. Let's do this. Horses.
Oh,
no,
horses,
fighting.
Sure, yeah.
Sorry, fighting.
We said fighting, and that's all there is to say. No, fighting, I definitely think between, just in general, the idea of rage versus controlled fighting and fighting as a means of control, but not necessarily in a negative way.
Yeah.
I think fighting is, to an extent, freedom in this. Like, it can be used for control, but it is freedom.
I was going to go the more Coen Brothers-y route and argue that maybe the fighting is more symbolic of sex.
Well, that too, yes, that was obvious. I'm sorry I skipped it, but yes, definitely that.
It's fighting is sex symbolism. But I think that also ties in
with the freedom symbolism, because her having the freedom to both fight with him and then have sex with him and not marry him.
And sometimes
it's
both.
Definitely a channel for that sexual tension, but it's also a freedom thing.
Yeah, I think so. Horses?
Horses.
The horses are a symbol, we decided. I think they're well, it's not so much a symbol as like they are kind of like used as a literary device.
Yes.
But we don't really have anywhere to put that, like miscellaneous literary devices.
Yeah, it's kind of a literary device for...
They're there to remind us of where Katsa's empathy level is at every given moment or any given moment.
No, I think that's fair. And, we think her grace is killing, but it's actually...
survival.
Later, it's found out that it's like survival. And she doesn't really feel pain. She doesn't really feel cold. She doesn't really feel hunger. And so she doesn't really have a lot of empathy for those that do. And it comes up repeatedly that she's pushing the horses too hard. And then you mentioned later that it kind of becomes a way, for a looking glass for us to see her recognizing her own privilege when it comes to traveling with Bitter Blue and realizing that she has to slow down in order to keep Bitter Blue both alive and well. It's more than just alive. It's more than just survival. She needs Bitter Blue to end up at the end
being a queen. Yeah.
And the way that she has to treat the horses is different, and the way that she has to travel.
She starts seeing their discomfort and their struggle in a different perspective. And
the cave.
We got another one, buddy.
I don't know what that's a symbol for.
I don't know what that could be. The cave. So Poe literally goes blind at the end of this story. Spoilers! That's why for our final clue, we made the joke that we did of referencing a movie 8 people have seen.
No one has seen this movie, and it's not on Disney Plus, so I'm sorry. But it is a Disney movie. And it's
not on Disney Plus.
I don't know, I will look for it.
It's so good, you guys.
Maybe it's
on YouTube.
It is on YouTube. It's called Wild Hearts Can't Be Broken, and it's about a girl who horse dives. And at some point, and I'm spoilers for the movie, guys, she dives into the water and she doesn't close her eyes. And
she's blinded.
She's blinded by it, which is what happens to Poe.
His horse gets struck with a bunch of arrows.
And it goes off the side of a cliff, and they fall into the water. And he has his eyes open, and he goes blind.
He loses his eyesight.
So that's why we use that clue. It's
sorry we're like this. But we both thought of it independently and then brought it up at the same time, and it made us both laugh really hard. So that's our clue.
Yeah.
So yeah, the caves thing. At the very end of the story, Poe is hiding out from the soldiers. He can escape into a cave that he can sense with his grace, but is pitch dark. You get there by diving under a waterfall in a very cold lake. And Katza cannot possibly see this cave at the end, but Poe describes it to her, and she pays attention. Like, she listens to his description of how beautiful the cave is. Which, you know, I love, Kayla literally just looked at me and scratched her nose. Like, in her soul, she was like, oh, the nose. Like, it's a lot, guys. It's a bit heavy-handed, is all I'm saying.
So that's kind of all we have in terms of, like, symbolism and style and all that, but there are more miscellaneous things that we wanted to discuss.
Yeah.
I wanted to kind of discuss Katza's hatred and later acceptance of the mind reader that is Poe, which we briefly discussed. She threatened and almost killed a mind reader who was a young girl.
A little girl, yeah.
But when she finds out that Poe can kind of read your mind if you're thinking about him, she hates the idea of people being in her mind, which again, I said I feel that. I don't know if I said that when we were talking about it or if I said it in the podcast, but I feel that.
For sure.
Sometimes, and this is probably TMI, sometimes when I'm sitting around, I'll have a thought, which is, if you can read my mind, I'm sorry. I sometimes do apologize in general if I have, like, an intrusive thought.
If it makes you feel any better, I say thank you to Google Home when it does stuff for me, because just in case it's sentient and can't express it yet, because I don't want it to feel disrespected.
Yeah. No, I feel that.
In its situation.
So what I'm saying is, when I'm in a room, if I have an intrusive thought, I will legitimately apologize to the room in my mind in case anyone can read my mind, which is insanity. Like, that's crazy. But it's, in my opinion, it makes sense in that, like, because I've read so much YA where people can read minds, I'm like, just in case. And I don't even believe that that's possible.
Same with
like,
sci-fi, though. Like, those same things. Like, you get paranoid in your genre.
Yeah, so I feel that. And I think it means a lot to me. Like, I think it means a lot to her having her own thoughts be private, because it's the only thing she has control over at the time in the book. But as she gets more control over her own life, she relinquishes that control more and more to Poe to be able to enter her mind. And in fact, she encourages it as the story goes on. And I think that was a really good instance of character growth.
You have him discouraging that interaction and her continuing to try to reach out. And
so I just thought that was kind of interesting and a very interesting take.
The romance is extremely well done.
I thought so too. Yeah, a little bit strong.
There was too much description of it.
Yes.
Like, you could have cut out a lot of the details of the romance.
It happened on its own, but I think the author was scared that we wouldn't realize it was happening on its own.
But the characters definitely had a lot of chemistry from moment one. So it felt very much like she just didn't completely trust her audience to get that a romance was happening. Yeah. But it was certainly a believable one. We also got to talk about Whammon. Women's issues come up a lot in this book. And as a self-described, albeit somewhat jokingly, SJW feminazi, I love that she's trying to tackle so many women's issues in this book.
Especially for young women.
Yeah, it's great that she's trying to tell those morals and those stories, but
it's a lot.
It's maybe too many different things to try to teach young women at the same time in one book. This is just one book.
Well, and I read the second book, which is about a different character, and it very much tackles the issue of, like, consent and, like, your own agency and being pursued and things like that. It's very much, she has goals.
And I just, even though I do enjoy that she's bringing light to issues that I think are very important for young girls to start exploring early on so that they're prepared for adult life. Like, are they the kind of person that wants kids or not? Are they the kind of person that wants to pursue relationships or just, doggedly pursue a career? That's a healthy thing to think about when you're young, but it just...
It's a bit much.
It's a lot. It feels soapboxy because... I think because it's not well integrated into the story, especially into the dialogue, and B, it's just too many different elements of that in one story.
Yeah. Briefly, I just want to say I really liked the Becoming Sailors offshoot plot.
Yeah, that was fun.
It didn't really have to happen, but I really liked it.
They were on a boat. Oh, sorry for all the people who thought maybe we were doing pirate stuff.
Yeah. But then once we got there, we had to stick with it. And then I did kind of like the blindness plot, but I felt that in some ways it was a bit... is it the word obvious? Ableist. Wow.
Yeah.
Words are hard, guys. It felt a bit ableist in that he loses his sight, but he's still, and he's been getting stronger. His race has been getting stronger and stronger throughout the book. He's been noticing more things without having to see it.
He's got neovision.
But it felt a bit, you've lost your sight, and that's so sad, and we're going to grieve for it, but then you're immediately getting it back. Even though it's in a different way, it felt very much like he doesn't have to really
start eating again until he gained control of his sight, so to speak.
He pretty much didn't have a will to live until he got some semblance of vision back, and I think that frustrated me a bit. Like, I understood that sort of grieving process that he had to go through, and I think that's fair because he did lose something. However, it felt a bit ableist in that he didn't really ever get over it. He just fixed it. He just went full Daredevil and became like, I don't need it. And
it's like, I'm better now. And then didn't ever cope with it as a character.
And I don't necessarily think it's terrible to have, people cope in new ways. I think that's important to discuss. But it felt a bit of an easy way out way to do it. Yeah. Instead of him being really good at it because he can sense, but still having things that he had to find new ways around. And he didn't really, I didn't feel like he really had to learn how to do anything again. Like, there was a short time where he was getting the hang of using his ability more, but it wasn't really him learning to do anything in a new way. It was just him.
And he just has a realization one day because of something she says about how to control it by not... He says, in a bout of self-pity, I decided to stop controlling it, and now I can control it. And it's like... That sounds like some new age hippie stuff.
Yeah, it was just a bit...
It's like, to control it, you have to lose control.
It just felt a bit ableist to me. And I'm physically typical, so I don't know that that's a fair assumption for me to make, but it certainly came across that way.
And it's worth pointing out when that stuff comes up too, because just like when we point out potentially racially charged things in stories and racism in stories and sexual issues in stories, it's part of the critique, it's part of the narrative, and it's part of people's real everyday lives, people who might read this story, and so you have to bake that into your critique.
That said, it bothered me. Oh, there was an audiobook at the library, but I couldn't get it.
No.
So I was about to say it bothered me that there wasn't an audiobook, but there was an audiobook. Because I was like, you have a character that goes blind, you need an audiobook. And I don't want to sound like, but...
It was just one that was like all checked out when I looked. And so I was like, well,
it does exist.
It's on archive.org, I guess.
So... Did you have anything else you wanted to discuss before we get to tropes?
Absolutely not.
Okay. This book has the most tropes of any of the books that we have read this season.
It does. Well, it had the most time to run into them.
It had so many plots that it got to hit almost all of the tropes.
No, it didn't have that many plots. It didn't have like a Charlie Bone level of plot threads.
It wasn't that there were too many plots. It's just that it kept going.
Yeah, it should have ended so many times. And it was such a long, tedious read for me that it's just...
So, here are the tropes that we found. Outfit descriptions.
Many of them.
Love triangle. This one could be a bit argued, but we feel that it's fair because of Gideon liking her and at first not knowing...
It seems love triangle-y in the beginning.
It was love triangle-y enough that we added it. Yeah. Orphans... Mentor character, which would be All and
Helda, I think.
Adults decide your life at age grace awakening. The moment that your grace awakens, your life is decided for you.
You're handed over to the king to see if you can be useful, and then you're either useful or you're not, and you die a pariah.
Yep. MacGuffin.
I said yes because I think Grandpa Tealif is a MacGuffin.
Let us know what you think. I'm not like the other girls because Katza is not like the other girls.
Not. She is different. She wears pants.
It's true. Puberty symbolism.
I'm going to say yeah on that one.
Yeah. Person is a lamp. I think that Ban is in love with Raffin, but I think he's a lamp. And you said that you think that Raffin is a lamp, so Person is a lamp is on there.
There's several other lamp characters.
There are a lot of lamp characters
to make that point.
Yeah. Crazy hair, because Katz's hair is always really curly till she cuts it off.
Mm-hmm. It's always kind of a wreck.
And Allegory of the Cave.
Yep.
Which puts us at a total of 11 out of 15 tropes.
That is so many tropes.
It's a lot. Some of them are used well.
Some of the ones, the outfit descriptions is usually a thing that we think of as egregious in a YA novel.
And annoying a bit.
And this, I think it served several, functional purposes.
I agree. And I think her hair wasn't really that egregious. I think it was pointed. It was also in that same era of her having to have something she didn't want about her body and then getting the choice to cut it off.
Exactly.
As well as, there were a couple of things that I think she used some of these tropes well.
Mm-hmm.
So my final thoughts on this before we do our rating system, I think that she had good ideas and good concepts.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked the book in a lot of ways. However, I don't think it was the best execution of all of those ideas and concepts.
Yeah.
And I think she was a bit heavy-handed in her opinions, which it detracted from the overall effect of the book.
Yeah.
That is my final opinion.
It was just so tedious as a read because, when you do that Hubert Selby Jr. thing and you make people read in real time with your character's travel time, like one of the worst DMs everybody knows, like DM is Dungeon Master from Dungeons & Dragons, for those of you who don't play that game. Like, it was just so tedious to read and frustrating to read in some ways because it just kept going on. And I was like, I just need to get to the next plot point kind of so that I can go back to work and do my job and still get this done. And it just, I don't know. It was so tedious that I had to dock points. Yeah. For sure. I found that upsetting. And it's the first book I can think of so far in this series that I'm like, other than Maximum Ride, but that one's special. It's the first one where I'm like just not interested in reading any sequels.
Okay. No, you didn't want to read any sequels for Matched either.
Oh, you're right. I wasn't really interested in that one. I forgot we read that book, honestly.
That's sad.
It's
That was the other long book that we read.
Yeah, and I also...
And it was faster, though.
It was. Well, I think...
Because we listened to the audiobook.
Yeah, Connie's a snappier writer, I think.
That too. So, for literary merit, actually, I just gave this book straight 3s. I think it was meh. It was very middle of the road for me.
You know what? Honestly, same.
So, 3.
Yeah.
This book gets a 3. It's meh.
It's a 3. That was the easy... I didn't even have to do math, you guys.
It's true. No math was involved. What are we going to do about our social media stuff?
We didn't have time to social media.
It's okay. I'll social media now.
Oh, no.
But this book was a 3, so it's meh.
Yeah.
You should consider it. It's a decent read. I enjoyed it. But it was tedious.
See, I think for you, a 3 you'll read again. A 3 for me, I'm up in the air about still.
Yeah, I think this would be an interesting Netflix show.
Yeah.
I think this should be a Netflix show.
I could see that, especially if it was done by people who have a lot of experience writing, like, CW shows, maybe. Just making it, maybe not going so heavy-handed with the cheesiness, but I think a little element of teen cheese would serve this book well. I think that would translate really well to screen. Yeah,
I think the story is really interesting.
Yeah. And I think Allie could be translated into a really interesting character by a competent actress.
Katza.
Oh, why'd I call her Allie?
I don't know, because you're talking about Ali Condi.
Yeah, probably. So I think Katzy could be...
Katza. We're almost there, guys. We're almost
so
there.
close. I think Katza could be turned into a really interesting character for screen by a competent young actress.
Yeah.
I really do.
Yeah, I agree. So as far as social media goes, I just kind of want to give a shout out to some of the people who've been commenting and like engaging, just because we really appreciate not only that you guys are engaging, but that you're liking it, and we hope that you continue to like it. So specific people that I wanted to talk to would be John M. Dugan. Duggan, sorry, man.
Dugan, I think.
You've had some really good guesses. Your guess for Charlotte's Web whenever we did.
I was so sad we weren't doing Charlotte's Web.
It was such a good guess, even though, I mean, it's a pig, so I get exactly where you were coming from.
Yeah, you actually made us change our second clue.
Yeah, we had a very
Charlotte's Web.
farmhouse aesthetic going, and so once you said that, we were like, oh man, that's a perfect guess. I wish that's the book that we were doing.
I
know. And honestly, man, you've been really good about just guessing and engaging, and we really
We're
appreciate.
glad you're around. We notice you.
Yeah, and also a Daughter of Words on Instagram as well. I have never read Throne of Glass, but your comment made me kind of want to check it out. So
yeah, ooh, and I've got one as well to our Aunt Judy.
Yes.
Hello, Aunt Judy. She reached out to me on Facebook, but I'm really bad at checking my social media because I'm just not responsible that way. But
she's done a couple of guesses and suggestions.
Yeah, she's given us a couple of guesses, but for me, what's really exciting is we got a book suggestion from her, and she was worked in children's books for a long time. You know.
YA books.
Yeah.
And she's the person who got me into the Rick Riordan stuff.
And she got us into Harry Potter. And so she's a big part of our reading experience in our childhoods.
So it's great to know that you're engaging.
Yeah. I hope you're enjoying the podcast. And I'm glad you sent us a recommendation. So we are actually collecting those recommendations. Even if you don't hear us mention yours specifically, I promise.
We are collecting.
We are collecting them.
We have 4 pages.
Thanks again to previously mentioned Buddy Paul for his recommendations for next season as well.
And then, of course, happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Celebrate Hanukkah. I hope you've been having a great Hanukkah. Hanukkah's over? No?
It's starting.
It started on the 2nd.
It did?
I believe so, yeah.
I haven't looked at a calendar in like a minute.
Oh. Well, happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, and Kwanzaa, and New Year's.
And whatever other holidays we missed, because I'm not going to look at a calendar now if I haven't so far.
We probably will not be posting an episode next week. We may drop some kind of short or something like that as a Christmas special. But
it's Christmas week.
But we likely won't drop a full episode next week.
So we'll be dropping our last episode at the beginning of the 2020. So this is our last episode
in 2019
of the decade.
And our next episode will be our last.
For the season.
Forever. For the season. We're going to be doing 12 books every season. So after our next book, which we'll go into this more next episode at the end, but after our next book, we'll be taking a few months off to collect our next book list and maybe get some guests on board and just get everything together for next season so that we can make it even better than this season.
Yeah, hopefully I can get my life together and we can find some music for an intro or an outro.
Yeah. Let us know if you guys have any suggestions for that too.
Yeah, I will say I think we should use, there's an old copyright-free, royalty-free song called Alice Blue Gown that I think would be a fun one for the pod. So that's what I want to do, but we haven't settled on anything. So if you have something you think would be cute, just shout us out.
We are on Twitter at YA_sisterhood. We're on Instagram, y.a.sisterhood. We're also we have an email if you want to send us any questions. It's y.a.sisterhoodpodcast@gmail.com. We also have a Facebook page, so feel free.
Do we still have a Tumblr?
We do still have a Tumblr.
You guys, we have a Tumblr.
We do. If you are into Tumblr, check us out there too. It's YA-sisterhood because they don't use dots. So, yeah, reach out if you guys have any questions that you'd like to ask. We might do a Q&A episode and or any suggestions that you'd like to maybe hear us talk about next season. We're hoping to do maybe a couple of more, popular books.
Yeah, like more
Well
known to this generation,
Yeah.
because we've done a few that were big for people our age.
known.
So I think it'll be fun. And if you want
But
to,
Racing's a bit newer, and
Yeah.
Mashed is a bit newer.
yeah, I guess that's true.
But a lot of them are more us growing up books.
yeah.
So yeah,
And trends change, so we're gonna keep up with the youth, I think, a bit more in the next season.
maybe a little. We'll do a mixture, but
Yeah.
we want to hear your suggestions. We want to hear your questions. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Kayla.
Oh, and I'm Jessica, and this has been the YA Sisterhood, and we'll see you next week.
Nope, the next week.
Oh, the week after that. Week after next week.
Bye.
Bye.